Peter, if you can hear us, we know you're there. We don't have a quorum, however, so we won't be voting on anything. Since we can't approve, well, are there any matters from the public? I don't see anybody from the public here, nobody online, so move past approval of the minutes since we can't do that. And since Chuck joined us, we'll proceed. Chuck, we'll go ahead with the Ivy Corridor pipeline study.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me get this started so I share the right screen.
Kristen, let's search plan what might get down trying to get the
Can you come through?
Yes. Yeah,
All right.
see your
search plan what might get down trying to get the I'm excited to through a buzzer thing. A little buzzer.
I think so, yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm just trying to get to the right screen to advance the slides. Okay, I'm going to show you the stuff from the Ivy Road study, as well as we have the smart scale material that we can review at the end if we have time. If you have any questions, just let me know and I can stop and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay.
All right, like I said, the Ivy Road, the Campo projects, and the Albemarle County projects. These applications are in and we're finalizing the cost estimates. So those will be, once those are done, we'll be actually submitting the submit button for those, working with the localities on doing that. All right, pipeline. This is one of the study tools we use to do studies. Basically prior to Smart Scale every year, we look at the VTrans long range plan, which is basically our state highway plan. And we look at the needs that are the top tier 1 or tier 2, and we work with the localities on identifying of those, which ones did they want to study for upcoming projects for Smart Scale. So that's available if you want to see it, but basically it identifies different needs that are on a corridor: multimodal, bike ped, transit, high crash locations, congestion areas, a whole menagerie of things. We can talk about it more as we move through, but those are identified, and then we coordinate the study to focus on that, on addressing those need items. Any questions about that? All right. So far, we've had 2 rounds of pipeline studies. In the first round, we studied the 250 corridor in Pantops, which is at some of the applications for this round, as well as the Louisa Road, Milton Road intersections out in Shadwell area. This round, we looked at the Ivy Road corridor and the Barracks Road corridor. Okay, here's the map of the Ivy Road corridor. This is the limits of the study, and these are the VTrans needs that were identified for these roadways in this area, and this is what we're trying to address with this study. As you can see, we've got bike and pedestrian, well, not pedestrian, but bicycle, capacity preservations, congestion mitigation, as well as transit access, equity, emphasis areas, and transportation demand management. Safety, these are the crash locations. The left part, dots are the severe and fatality crashes that were on the corridor. Two of them were on the bypass, and the rest of them were on the well, there's three, and there's one on to the east of on Ivy Road. The rest of them were all severe injury crashes. And then the right slide is just all of the injury crashes. The injury crashes are broken down into 4 categories, from a fatality all the way to non-visible injury. So you can see we've had a number of crashes on the corridor, and that's one of the things we're trying to address with the study.
It was 2018 to 2023.
Yes. So it's basically like 6 years worth of crash data.
And is it attributed to something, or is that what the study's going to look at? Like, is it attributed to poor lighting or speed, or is that the purpose of the study?
Well, as part of the study, we'll look at what the attributing factors are, whether they're the type of what type of crash it is, whether it's day or night, what the weather conditions are, pavement conditions are. We evaluate all of those different variables when we do the analysis.
Thank you.
These are the level of service for the no build, future no build condition. As you can see, many of the side streets start to have failing levels of service because of the volumes of traffic on the main line. The table on the left is a signalized intersection, and the table on the right is the two-way stop control intersections. But as you can see, most of the east-west movements are level service A, and the you're starting to see the failing level service Ds and Fs on the minor side streets. Canterbury, for signals, Canterbury is the signal that is the worst because that's where the old Garth Road comes underneath the railroad and comes into the intersection opposite Canterbury. So that's why it has a failing level service, because it is going to implode in the future because of the sheer volume of traffic that wants to go westbound at that intersection from the bypass. Okay, the study, we identified 4 basically segments of road, and we grouped those recommended improvements into 4 different categories, areas. We looked at the western portion, which is from Boar's Head west. Then we looked at Boar's Head east, and then we looked at the eastern section, which is basically east of the bypass. So these are the packages that we looked at the west end. This is package 1. It includes the right in, right out, left in at Edmond Drive, which is there at it's the old entrance to Boar's Head. And then Farmington, we're recommending a roundabout. I know there's a railroad crossing there, but I think it'll still work. We may have to look at how we can control the left turns, eastbound left turns and the westbound right turns, so that the roundabout will still function if there's a train on the tracks. We also looked at Boxwood Estate Road, converting it to a right in, right out. Because you can make the U-turns at the roundabout, and then a right in, right out, left in at Edmond Center. We also included a frontage extension of the parallel road on the north side, all the way over to connect to Boxwood Estates, so they can still get access to Boar's Head, the Boar's Head intersection. And then we had a raised median on the west end through that section of the corridor, and then we're proposing a roundabout at Boar's Head. The roundabout at Boar's Head seemed to get a lot of consensus and a lot of acceptance amongst all the stakeholders, as well as it got pretty high acceptance from the 3.61 from the public. So we felt that was a good alternative for that location. Any questions about that? That's just one. We have another section for this recommendation for this one that they looked at. But if there's any questions on any of these, let me know.
The figure there is on a scale of what, 1 to 5 as far as support from the public? Is that what we're looking at?
Yes.
Thanks.
And Chuck, the new, connector road that parallels, Ivy Road to the north, is that, what is that for again?
Would connect those businesses. There's part of a parallel road there right now. We would just extend it further to the west, all the way to Boxwood, so that the people that are in those businesses and the development that's along that side could actually take the parallel road to get to Boar's Head. If they wanted to come out and make a left-hand turn to go into town, because we're taking away that movement at their entrance.
Okay, and then they can use the roundabout at Forest like that, yeah,
Yes.
okay, all right, thank you.
All right, this is another option of some of the other options we looked at for this corridor. We had a green tea at Edmond Drive. We had the right in, right out only at Edmond Center. We still had the raised median over a portion of it, and then we had the Boar's Head roundabout. That was the main, for that intersection, that was the main option that we got acceptance on from most of the stakeholders, and we got a lot of support for it. So. But this is another alternative. I will say that there's not a lot of needs out at this end once you go west of Boar's Head. So these improvements would probably be more in the long-term, mid to long-term category, because there's not a lot of demand for them at this point.
Were you just
But
saying
it was-
were you just saying the roundabouts too, or probably
Well,
long-term?
not the roundabout at
Well,
Boar's Head. That one is, but from Boar's Head, for the west of Boar's Head, most of the improvements that we were proposing are more mid to long-term improvements, because there's not a lot of demand for them at this time.
I understand, okay.
Okay, for the mid section, we had a focus group as part of we had a stakeholders group, and then we had a focus group. When we brought the recommendations to the focus group, they wanted to whittle them down to this group of projects as the package that they wanted to present to the public. I have the next slide will show some of the other options that we considered and we put out to the public. But this is their preferred package. And as you can see, we have a roundabout at Boar's Head. We have the raised median between Boar's Head and Canterbury. We have a roundabout at Old Garth, Canterbury. And then we have a triangle there was a study that was previously done, and it looked at not a circular road, but it's a triangle, which was made up of one-way roads in that little triangle part north of the railroad tracks and Ivy Road, that was part of Old Ivy, Garth, and the ramp coming off the bypass on the north side. That had a lot of support also. There was channelized right turn lane to the westbound on-ramp off of Old Ivy. Extension of the northbound and southbound decel and acel lanes for the ramps on the north side. And then a shared use path along the south side of Old Ivy Road, basically from Garth Road intersection all the way to the Old Ivy 250 intersection to the east. And then a one-way westbound raised curb, basically so we could put a sidewalk underneath that underpass on the east end. So this was the option that had the most support across all of the options that we had from a package perspective.
I have a question on this package. So the acceleration lanes on the 29 north, there's actually two of them in real life. There's the one that's got the blue square looking at it. So you kind of come on from Old Ivy. And then there's the one where you turn from Ivy and do a whole kind of like, 270, and then come on under the bridge. And that one just ends, like it's very short.
No, one of the we looked at a couple of different options. To there wasn't a lot of support to extend those ramps on the south side. Long term, we could possibly improve those ramps, but we'd have to widen lengthen the bridges across 250 pass, which is right now it's not economically feasible. So in the future, that may be something we'd have to look at.
Right. Yeah, I've seen a lot of very near misses at those spots.
And we did look at that, and one of the options that we didn't get brought forward was to extend those loop ramps further to the south, so you have a longer distance for the A cell and D cell south of the onto the bypass. But the folks from the university, which owns the property on the east side, and the folks from the Canterbury development on the west side, they were adamantly against moving that forward. So that didn't get brought forward.
Yeah, here's my shock face.
So this So here's some of the other options we looked at. This is the long-term solution we looked at, and this is where basically we're rebuilding the bridge, as well as to rebuild the bridge, across 250, across the bypass. The railroad bridge is integrated into the 250 bridge, so we have to replace both of them. And to do that, we have to double track the railroad because we can't close the railroad. So that's going to be a very expensive project. And so we did look at it long term. And this would actually extend those ramps underneath the bridges and make them work like they should work and give you adequate A cell and D cell. It also provides roundabouts at both the ramp terminals on 250. And as part of that, we felt that we'd probably look at having to, at some point, we're going to need the 6-lane, the bypass, probably from Barracks Road southward, just because of the sheer capacity constraints that we're starting to experience. So this was one of the project that was identified as a long-term solution.
What's your criteria for capacity constraints? What do you use for capacity? What's your measure?
I mean, you could do it. Right now, we're seeing issues with the ramps backing up. And right now, sometimes the ramp from the interstate backs up all the way almost to this intersection. There's a different modeling in the past has shown that this section is going to carry upwards of 70 to 80,000 vehicle trips a day. I think the southern piece between Fontaine and the interstate we were looking at over 100,000 vehicle trips a day in the future. The newer models aren't projecting as much volume, but if we start getting to those volumes, we're going to have to start looking at adding some additional capacity to the roadway. What we're trying to do for the most part is preserving what we've got out there as long as we can until we reach that breakdown point for the actual facility. Because you've got weaving that occurs between the ramps, on and off ramps between here and Ivy Road and Leonard Sandridge and the bypass and Barracks Road and the bypass. We're already seeing the northbound movements at Barracks Road break down and start to back out. And that's going to still become more prevalent as we move forward into the future because of all the development and the demand for this facility, because it's the only way to get around Charlottesville.
Chuck, I've got a question that's related. It's not on your maps here, but since you brought up traffic being backed up all the way from 64 up to this intersection, I think it might be kind of relevant. But as you're going south on 29, headed toward I-64, there are a ton of rear-ending accidents there. People trying to get into that new left turn lanes, and the traffic just back up for literally miles. And it's because people cruise along at 60 miles an hour, then all of a sudden traffic is stopped. And I'm just wondering if, even if we can't fix the roads, could we at least put up some signs that flash when there's a lot of traffic?
That's one of the locations we're gonna look at, next year. We're gonna relook at that interchange. We looked at it in the first round of Smart Scale. That interchange as well as Fontaine, and we didn't get the project funded. So we went back and broke it down into pieces, and we funded pieces of the project, or pieces of a solution to try to address the immediate needs. And then, those are what was built in round 2 and 3. But we're starting to see those start to fail. So we're gonna have to go back and look at them again to see what we can do to further fix that issue so that doesn't keep occurring, because that's an issue.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you say so, and that's why I brought up the signage, to give us an interim solution. You know, something with a sensor that could be like, slow down, traffic stop ahead. It's just for safety purposes. I mean, my own kids were in a wreck there, so, you know.
Traffic engineering's aware of that, and I'm not sure what they're doing at this point. I know they're aware of it. They're working on some other stuff right now, but that's one of the things they're going to be focused on, trying to fix that issue as it keeps occurring and gets worse, to make sure that we don't have those occurring.
All right. Thanks for letting me divert us a little bit.
All right. Then we had some eastern solutions at east of the bypass. This is like for corridor between the interchange and the Old Ivy underpass. We looked at some possible roundabouts at these locations, as well as a raised median for access management along the corridor. Those scored okay pretty much in the middle. But those are something, again, these aren't really extremely high priority needs. So these might be something that might be more of a midterm or longer solution for this portion of the corridor. Next steps, what we're doing, we're finalizing the preferred alternative. We're coordinating that with the county. They're supposed to be sending us some information, and then we can start finalizing what the preferred alternative is going to be and how we're going to package it up because of the changes in Smart Scale this round. For MPOs, they have to submit either interchange projects or they have to submit entire study packages. Well, we don't want to fund this entire study package, so we're trying to figure out a way to break this study into manageable chunks that the MPO may be eligible to submit for Smart Scale. And that's pretty much what we're working through right now. So once we get that done, we'll be putting together the report, and then it will go out for review, and then we'll be wrapping the study up. Any questions? That's pretty much all the slides I had.
Yeah, I have one more question, if I might. It's going to sound silly a little bit, but why this project? How does this qualify? We have so many road issues. We've had other corridor studies. Where I live, we did a corridor study. Why is this? How does this qualify versus the other needs in the county? How do you figure that out? I bet I can find more accidents in other places than you can find there right now, as an example.
We look at those. Next round, we're probably going to go back to 29 because it's got some of the highest crash locations in the whole county. Mainly like Greenbrier and Woodbrook.
Right.
Those are two of the highest crash locations, and they haven't been studied since we did the Solutions 29 package of projects. I was waiting for those to get flushed out, and it's been probably close to 10 years since those were done. So we're going to go back and start looking at that corridor for more improvement projects. But we'll go back, look at the data, and see what the next high priorities locations are, and then we'll coordinate those efforts with the county and the MPO to see which corridors they're interested in us in looking at.
The county had done a East Rio corridor study, not done by VDOT, but it was a fairly involved study. Why don't you just pick up the information from that and use it?
Well, they're submitting the one roundabout project this round for Smart Scale. That's one
That
of
was
the
all
applications.
done before the corridor study. The roundabout was, well, you're talking about the roundabout, Hillsdale. Oh, the Hillsdale, right.
Yeah, on that corridor, from that study, a project was selected to submit for Smart Scale.
Okay.
It just depends on what's the priority for the locality. I mean, we've gotten we did the roundabout, but that was not part of the study. And then we did last round, I think they submitted Belvedere and it was funded, so it's going to be moving forward. They're submitting the roundabout at Hillsdale and Old Brook Road. We'll see how it does in the mix of the applications. As they move up the list, they'll submit those applications. We typically don't submit whole corridor studies because of the cost benefit it's too low for it to justify to rank very high and get funded. So we usually break it down into pieces.
Hey, Marty, the pipeline studies have to qualify in V-Trans. They have to like meet certain levels of V-Trans needs in order for them to be eligible to be studied through the pipeline. So that's the first step. If you're asking, like, you start with what's eligible and then you get the concurrence from the localities.
Well, I was trying to get a sense of how does it qualify to be eligible?
Yes.
Pipeline?
Yeah, so that's the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment
Yeah.
determines what the priorities are based on the identified statewide priorities that the CTB votes on. So it's not something that's submitted by the localities or by the regions. That comes from the state. They identify so it's based on congestion, reduction, capacity, safety, those kinds of things. That there's, we could look at interactive V-Trans and you can see what the needs are, but those are all identified at the state level. And then we can choose from those and work with the localities and the stakeholders to say, of this list of projects, which ones might be the most of interest to you in terms of selecting those pipeline studies that are conducted.
Okay.
You have a question?
We also, every year we go through, or every 2 years before Smart Scale, we go through and look at the high crash locations, and we'll develop some material that we present to the county to identify if there's any of those locations that they want us to look at and study and prepare for Smart Scale. I mean, we've had a number of those over the years that we've put together for the county and the MPO.
Peter, go ahead.
Yes, so Chuck, this may be premature at this early stage, but and I know there's no public transportation in that area today, but with the additional student housing that's going in there by JPJ, there is certainly a fair amount of walking done that could be expanded. I guess maybe UTS runs out to University Village, but how much is public transportation and bike ped needs being considered at this stage?
Well, as part of the project, we are looking at a shared use path along Old Ivy Road. There's been a lot of discussions with the county staff and the stakeholders group on what to include. Kat and Jaunt were invited to the meetings, but they opted not to participate. We try to include transit. Transit was one of the items that was identified as a need in this area, but we didn't get any commitment from them to look at that for this corridor. Although there could be some needs coming in the future, especially as you go out the bypass towards White Gables. You got Farmington out there, you've got the Birdwood. So there are definitely going to be some needs out there that might be able to be served by transit.
Well, and yes, I saw the multi-use on Old Ivy, but Ivy Road clearly could use a lot of improvements for bike ped access?
We're sort of waiting on some of that because we don't know what's going to be the outcome of the 3-notch trail study, to know what the alignment of that might be. And we're not really doing anything with the bridge. When we do the roundabout project, we will look at that area at Canterbury and where Old Garth comes through, and we will include some facilities along that in that area. It's just what the destinations are. I don't think we really identified per se in the study. But we'll have to work through that if we put together an application on where we would put those facilities at that location.
Yeah, and I mean, the 3-notch trail is a intriguing project, but that's not going to meet the needs of people, who live at University Village, who want to get to, the Foods of All Nations shopping center. They're not going to go all the way out of their way to that trail to just walk a mile up the road. So I hear how that could be relevant, but I don't think it's going to be, at first glance, a major impact on needs for bike ped. And I don't want to speak, well, just because Cat and John doesn't show up doesn't mean the community isn't think this is important consideration. They have a habit of not showing up, and just they're understaffed, overworked, and don't seem to have time for these types of things. We've had that experience too many times. So I would just at least voice from my standpoint for this group that we need to make sure that public transit isn't an afterthought as it too often is. Please.
Yeah, no, I know most of the studies, it's not a problem. We did in this, and we did get interest from the county and a lot of discussion from the county. We're not really doing anything to the bridge on 250, so we weren't really looking at bike peds necessarily on 250. And they opted to put the trail on Old Ivy Road versus Ivy Road, just because it was easier to do and there was possible more right of way along that corridor to place it. I know when we look at those longer term improvements along Ivy Road, especially at Colonnades and some of those Still Freed and Reed, we'll basically be including pedestrian accommodations and bicycles, and we can consider that at that time. But those were more longer term projects than something that was more shorter term.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, I guess we'll move on to Sandy and Smart Scale.
I think Chuck's just gonna keep rolling with it if y'all are good with that.
Okay, all right.
All right. So we've got 3 applications for the MPO. Well, 4, but there's 2 of them are similar. One of them is for the 5th Street interchange. The second one was the Pantops pipeline study from last round that wasn't funded, so they're going to submit those scenarios as one application. And then we had the 2 Barracks Road projects, one for Barracks Road from the whole corridor from Georgetown all the way to Emmett Street, and then the section from the interchange, including the interchange to Emmett Street. So I'll be going through those. This is the concept for the interchange at 5th Street. We're looking at a conversion to a DDI. We've completed the interchange analysis report. It's in for review with to central office and FHWA. So once we get that finalized, we'll be complete with a study. But basically we're looking at the DDI conversion, and we're also installing a shared use path from the trail project that was funded last round, which you can see on the far right side of the screen. That little purple ties into the green dots, which is the trailhead from the trail project that was funded last round. And then it's going to run all the way to the west other end and tie into, there's an existing sidewalk at that private entrance that's right there that we're going to tie into. On the west side, we're actually adding a bike lane for a portion just to merge the bicyclists off the shared use path, because there's not a shared use path further than that. in with the flow of traffic so that they can actually share the road. And we'll sign it appropriately. There's signs shown, but they're not very visible in this because they weren't yellow. The yellow didn't show up on the slide. Any questions about this one?
No, apparently not.
All right. The next is the Pantops project. This is Rolkin. What we're proposing there, and they're doing crosswalks across 250 and Rolkin and on both sides of the road. We're also putting a sidewalk along 250 on the south side all the way to State Farm, which is currently not a gap right now in that facility. The other part of that project is the intersection at the east end. This is out at Peter Jefferson Parkway intersection. We're converting it to what we call a through cut, which basically doesn't allow the through movement, but allows the left turns in and out. So that's what it's being converted to. We're also closing the crossover that's mid-block between here and Westminster Canterbury, where there's a signal that would go to the hotel because it has access to the signal also, because there were some crashes that were starting to show up there. This project also includes a 80-car parking ride lot, or 50-space parking ride lot, excuse me. We've also included, as part of that, is bus circulating. So they would come in, they can make the left off Peter Jefferson Parkway, come in off of 250 and then circulate around and come back to Glen Orky and come back out and make the right to go into 250, go into town, or they can make the left out if they wanted to go back to the interstate. And this was something, like I said, this was developed as part of the pipeline study last round. And this was actually recommended, scored well enough to be on the initial recommendation for funding last round of Smart Scale. But the county opted to switch this project with, or the MPO switched this project with the District Avenue Roundabout project. So we're hoping that this one scores as well as it did last round. Any questions? All right. Okay, now we go to Barracks Road. This is the actual county's portion of the Barracks Road project, which basically converts the existing intersection at Georgetown to a roundabout. And then closes the median between Georgetown and the bypass, and adds a shared use path along that south side that was given up by the center median. We're also actually improving the crosswalks on the ADA ramps on the north side. We're also including a bus pad on where the existing bus stop is on the south side. And we're also putting a pad in on Georgetown Road where the existing bus stop is, so county can put a shelter there in the future. Project includes crosswalks. We're also actually putting raised crosswalks, and we'll be putting some kind of active pedestrian crossing facilities there, like rapid flashing beacons. Those will be looked at and determined at a later time once we get if the project's funded. We're also including a crosswalk at the interchange. This one, because it's got to be a standalone project, we added a right turn lane on the eastbound approach to the bypass, because that was something that was called out in a previous study and was also recommended from this study as an alternative, to address it as a standalone project. And we do include a crosswalk at that intersection on the west side of the bypass to connect to the existing sidewalk on the north side, which goes into the city. So the shared use path would end at this point. Any questions about this one?
Just a quick one, because I know this, in some of the studies I was looking at, in recent months, this included some other potential improvements over closer to that, 250 interchanges, with, roundabouts over there. Is that a separate deal?
Yeah, what there
Or
is there's 3 projects here. The county is submitting this project, and then the MPO is submitting, the next project is what the MPO is submitting.
Oh, I see.
But wait,
This
there's
is
more.
this is this is one of the MPO projects. They're also submitting the whole corridor, but there's a little bit of differentiation between this one and the last one that I showed you. Between Bennington Road and the bypass, there's a different lane configuration there so that they can both stand alone as separate applications. This is the MPO's application for the interchange with the shared use path that runs to the east. Like I said, we're able to reduce the width underneath the bridge to a single eastbound lane, and that gives us the capacity of underneath the bridge to extend the shared use path underneath the bridge so we can run it all the way through the corridor. Again, we're providing crosswalks on both sides of the roundabouts on the exterior of the interchange so you can cross from one side to the other side. At Melmont, we're actually rebuilding that intersection, which currently is kind of skewed and it doesn't meet ADA requirements. So we're bringing it up to ADA standards on both sides of the road.
When you
Just
say
at the-
excuse me, when you say crosswalks, I'm just curious, you're gonna have lights for pedestrians crossing, or
Correct.
how is that?
At the roundabouts, we're either going to have hawk signals or rapid flashing beacons. And for Melmont, it's a signalized intersection. So we'll have, it'll be part of the signal.
Is that a general standard for the roundabouts? I mean, they're putting a lot of roundabouts. You're gonna have crosswalks with signals wherever you have roundabouts for pedestrians crossing.
Just recently updated the standards. So, we're basically going to have active pedestrian controls at all of those crosswalks at the roundabouts. We're not sure what those are going to be yet. It's either going to be rapid flashing beacons or hawk signals, but we're not positive which one it's going to be. It's going to have a separate engineering study and then determine what the actual controls are going to be. But it'll be more.
If you tell us, I'm just curious, if you tell a pedestrian to walk across, walk signals, does that mean you're stopping cars going around the roundabout?
They will have to yield at those locations and stop for the pedestrians. So hopefully it's not a lot of people making those maneuvers. Most of those instances, the on-ramp on the west side is a single lane, so you're not having to cross the distance is very short, like 14 or 15 feet between the ADA ramps.
I'm sorry, sort of thinking more of the crosswalk around Whole Foods, for example. That's gonna be an active area, and you're gonna have pedestrians. I'm just in general want to understand. You're gonna have some type of active crosswalk there, and hope that the cars are gonna stop when the pedestrians are crossing the street. I don't want to be the first.
I'm not sure what's on the plans for that intersection, whether they're putting rapid flashing beacons up or not. That was funded before the new regulations came out.
Yeah,
So
they're putting signals there.
Are they okay?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. You went to that meeting. I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't recall what was in that one. But I know that they're going to some of the rules have changed like in the last year. So it's requiring us to do more than what we would have done in the past.
Okay.
Quick question on the shared use path. I think you said this, but it was quick. So it is going to be separated from the road. And what's the width that we ended up with on that shared use path?
10 feet.
Cool.
And I think, I can't remember what the setback is, whether it's 6 feet. That was one of the things because of the distance. We might have had to get a waiver on the setback requirements. It's not real, I think it's at least 6 feet, but I'm not positive.
Oh, yeah, the bike lane over the parkway, that's a joke.
But the whole point of this was to try to, especially on the west end, was try to not impact those properties on the south side. And by narrowing the road and reducing the median width on that west side, we were able to accommodate that shared use path without impacting those properties. And let's see, one more slide here for this one. This is the alternative that the counties or the MPO is going to, when they submit the whole corridor package, this is the alternative for that west side between Bennington Road and the interchange, what it's going to look like. With the narrow area to the west and the median and the Georgetown intersection improvements. But this is the only part that is different between the last two sketches that I showed you. And I can go back and show you that slide. Let me go back 2 slides. So instead of, you'll have this instead of this right here. Can you still see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay. You won't have this right turn lane and the median, wide median. You'll have the narrower median here, and then you'll have the roundabout here. So it's just between this intersection here at Bennington Road and the interchange changes. And this is what the change looks like. But the rest of it is all the same. All right, that's all the MPO applications. This is the Albemarle County applications. We can go through those real quick. They're submitting 4 Old Trail and 250 West at Western Albemarle High School. The Rio Road roundabout that we talked about a little while ago. I'll show you that. Obviously the Barracks Road, which we just saw, and then they're submitting Plank Road. And that was another location that shows up as a tier 1 need in VTrans. That traffic engineering did a study on, but the county is going to submit that as one of their applications to address the safety issues down there. So, okay, here's the Old Trail roundabout concept. And this includes a shared use path. Well, there's sidewalk along Old Trail right now. They're going to tie into that. And there's an old broken up shared use path that runs east along the north side of 250 all the way to the middle school, which is right there in the northeast quadrant. And then they're going to put a crosswalk in. And actually, this is the older sketch. There's another crosswalk across the Westminster entrance to Western Albemarle High School to a sidewalk that's proposed on the west side of the entrance road that the school system is going to put in the near future. So this was submitted last round. It was also a recommendation from the county study that they did for the Crozet area. One of the things I noticed when I was doing the updated analysis is that in the design year, which is like 2054, the volumes on 250 get to the point where we probably need to look at widening 250. It's widened just to the west of here. But this section the volumes start to get so high that the road starts to break down and the queues start to get really, really long at the intersections. Any questions about this one? All right. Okay, this is the peanut that's on Rio Road. This is the final version of it they came up with. You can see the Hillsdale's to the north. You've got, what is that? Old Brook is the road south to the right, and the other one is Huntington, I think. And then you've got the Old Brook Road to the north on the east side that goes through that townhouse complex. It does include a shared use path all the way around. It basically, once you get away from the intersection, it splits and puts ramps down so the bicyclists can go out on the bike lanes on hydraulic or on Raya Road and on Hillsdale. But it basically, they can get around the intersection if they don't want to drive through roundabouts. And again, we will be putting controls at these crosswalks. We're just not sure what those are going to be. Probably on Hillsdale, it might on Raya Road, could be hawk signals, but on the single lane approaches, it's probably just going to be rapid flashing beacons. But traffic engineering will have to weigh in and make that determination during the design phase of the project.
Tell me, so that's Abington Crow, not Cobalt Ridge on the top of the image there.
Do what?
Sorry, I'm just getting oriented here. It took me a sec to realize the south was up, and anyway.
Yeah, it's sort of upside down.
Yeah, that's okay. I got there. The property to the south of the Peanut, that home, is that?
Yes.
Bought, demoed for this, or?
That's the one. The red line is the right-of-way line that we would need. The blue line or the violet or purple line, whatever you want to call it, is the utility easement. We didn't have time to get that moved. We're going to try to avoid taking the house at all possible. But we'll need some additional right-of-way and some construction easements to actually build this project.
Okay.
So I know that's a site plan in with the county right now, and they want to convert it to like a bed and breakfast and put some sort of.
Yeah, some kind of boba tea shop or something. I don't know. Anyway, and then the church there has also been doing a lot of expansion of its whole operation with the school. Is the entryway there still left turns into that church parking lot unchanged?
I do not know.
I realize that's getting into the minutes.
Is that the lower right?
You're right. Of the,
Chuck, it looks like, isn't that yellow outline, wouldn't that be a raised median?
The green would be the raised median. The yellow is just the striped out area. So the green looks like it goes partway to the entrance. So it's possible that we could shorten it enough to allow for the lefts in, but not the lefts out. Or possibly the lefts out too. I don't know.
Yeah, or they may have to invest in a new entrance to their. Well, you've seen those on the other committee.
Yes, I have.
Like I said, this is the preliminary concept plan. If it gets recommended for funding and it moves forward, we'll have to work through some of those details during the design phase. And there'll be another chance for the public to weigh in and provide comments, and because we don't even have survey, we're just basically going off the aerial photos.
Sure. And then the green space in the middle of Peanut, is that big enough for a kickball game?
Very narrow.
You can put some trees in there and some shrubs, maybe. That's
community garden.
I think the stormwater management pond that they showed right there in front of the church, I think it's underground. So that's not going to be something you're going to be able to see. All right. Any more questions? All right. Last one is Plank Road. Like I said, this is south of Charlottesville on 29 at 60 or 692. And this is this is a location where we have seen a lot of crashes. North-south, that road in the middle. Basically, there's a lot of industry on it. There's a fire station on the south side, so we're gonna work with the fire station to make sure they can get across there without having to go make the right and then make the U-turn and come back. They need to go straight across. So we'll work with them on that median to make sure that they can cross it. But basically, we're converting these 3 crossovers to restricted crossing U-turns. So you will not be able to go straight across. You'll have to make the right in, right out, left in on the approaches on the side streets, the minor road.
To get across 29, you have to go from
Yeah.
Plank, you have to go up and come back.
You have to make a right, then go to the next crossover, make a U-turn and come back and then make the right again.
Oh, okay.
This was done, traffic engineering did this study this year or last year. In the recently they did this one, and then they presented it to the county, and the county decided they wanted to submit it. So as a small scale application. So we refined it a little bit, and especially on the northern end. I think the right turn lane between Plank Road on the northbound side, which is to the right, gets extended all the way back to accommodate U-turning traffic at that south end U-turn movement. And I think they're extending the box culvert right there that's under the road. And these will be unsignalized. These won't be signalized.
And how do you prevent someone from cutting across? You close that off?
There's a raised median across the middle. So they'd have to drive over a curb.
Got it.
We would basically, in the center one, like I said, we're going to work with the fire department to come up with something that they could cross, but it wouldn't be something that normal vehicles could cross.
Got it.
So the fire department didn't have to go all the way down and then U-turn and come back to go straight across the intersection.
That all of them, Chuck?
That's all I've got. You guys got any questions for me?
Remind me the timing on when these get submitted and when we find out.
The deadline for submission is August 1st, so like in 2 weeks. After that, we will evaluate them and go through and score them over the next 5 months, and then they will be presenting them to the CTB in January. The recommended priority list of how they all scored. And then in the spring, the CTB will talk to the different localities and their constituents to see which projects they want to fund out of the list based on the priorities. And then they will adopt as part of the 6-year plan adoption for next year, they will be projects that will be funded, will be adopted into the 6-year plan. So we won't know anything until January on how well how these projects scored.
A lot of that has to do with the other projects that come in from the state or
Well, they got to go through all of them. We've got 25 projects just in our district. Richmond has over 100. So typically we get between 300 and 400 applications every round of smart scale. So it's a big undertaking to go through and score them in the various scoring categories. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of economic development this time since they took that out. So that reduces a lot of the workload on us at the front, as part of the next step. And L&D is doing all the cost estimating and the sketches. So from that perspective, the validation goes pretty quickly for us. So we'll be done probably middle of August. from our perspective.
Out of 300 or 400 statewide, about what percentage of those you think will get funded?
It typically is around a third.
Okay.
We got, we had 36 applications last round. And I think we got 12 funded.
Mhm.
So we did pretty good. We usually, most of our projects score in the top 50% across the state. And that's what I strive to do with our applications. We're not always that way. We've had projects that come in the bottom of the pile. And I typically don't want to have those. So I try to weed those out early on so we don't have to deal with spending resources on something that's not going to get funded.
Right.
Hey, Chuck, most of these had sidewalks and shared use paths as part of them. Is there a philosophy or guidelines? You know, is the goal to fill gaps or just place those where you anticipate people would use them? How do you incorporate those sidewalks and shared, like, are they going somewhere or do they just end?
We work with the localities. Part of our guide is we got to provide accommodations for bikes and pedestrians with every project. So we look at the project and then work with the county on look at their plans. We look at their bike ped plans. We try to identify where the greatest needs are and include those facilities to help fill out their network with our project. There are some projects that we do in the past. We don't have any of this. Well, we have one this round that's just a shared use path. It's in the town of Culpeper. It's basically like 4 blocks long. But it does include road improvements and a bus stop. So, I mean, it just depends on the project and what the county's looking for. Like on Barracks Road, we're putting in the shared use path along Old Ivy Road. I'm on Barracks, Old Ivy Road. So that's something that we work with them on, identifying the location and the right facility. Barracks Road, we put the shared use path on the south side of the road. We were able to put that in there at a reasonable accommodation to address a need that they have, and we were able to do it without having a lot of right-of-way costs, which is usually the biggest issue.
Got it. Thank you.
Any further questions for Chuck? No, good. Okay, well, guess we'll move on to additional matters from the committee and the public. No members of the public here. Do you have any additional members? Items from the committee.
I would, at some point in the future, would love to hear about the NEVI, which is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. Like, I understand there are 18 locations across the state approved, and now there's going to be another phase of applications and approvals. So if it works sometime in the future, just hear about how that's going, because that's a lot of money that's available to the state for a future,
Erin Belt spoke at the policy board and maybe MPO TAC
Okay.
at some point last year. So, that's something that, they can find a meeting link and send that out to you.
Okay, great.
But there's also the Queen Cities, the Virginia Queen Cities is doing another initiative.
Right.
Yeah.
So there might also be somebody good to get in touch with.
Yeah, I know Alan.
Well, maybe.
Well, I'd like to make an observation. Having served on this committee for a while, our committee includes the name or the word advisory. And in truth, do we get much chance to actually offer our advice? We get a lot of information and that's fine, but as far as actually influencing anything, I don't know, I feel somehow that we don't really do too much of that. I don't know how the rest of you feel on that. guess some of you are too new to know the difference yet, but, I just like to say, Marty and I serve on a CAC, which is the Community Advisory Committee, and like this committee, it's of course, we don't have any power to do anything, we merely offer advice, but we do influence, yeah, we do have some influence here. Most of the things we're looking at, like tonight, are done deals, right? I mean, we can't affect what anything, and personally, I have tried, I mean, I'll share with you what I know about, the project at Rhino and Hillsdale and Old Brook, for example. There was a corridor study that I mentioned, that Marty mentioned that the county funded, and we hired a line and grade to do a corridor study on Rhino Road, not quite to 20, East Rhino Road, not quite to half a mile east of that, and to actually John Warner Parkway, but then continuing on old East Rhino Road all the way to the city line. And it was a very elaborate aspirational kind of thing with, you know, tree-lined streets and fancy medians and all kinds of things. And one of the things was this peanut-shaped roundabout. Interestingly, one of the few things that it did advise different was the roundabout at East Rhino and John Warren Parkway. Kind of took a different approach to that, but the county supervisors didn't want to rock the boat, so they basically overruled that part, and then since had the project to put the green tea in at Belvedere, which was part of the study, but I offered a couple alternatives at the time, and the line and grade pretty much dismissed them. And so I presented them again to the county and to VDOT both. And I specifically talked to Sean Nelson, who's the Culpeper District engineer, and he was kind of dubious that the green or that the peanut-shaped roundabout would get funded because it's too expensive. There's a lot of right-of-way involved in that, and what I had suggested, simplest thing was reconfigure traffic lights. The accidents at those intersections are because you have two intersections about 200 feet apart, and the traffic lights change at the same time. So what you have is somebody goes through the first light that they get to on Rhino Road, they're sailing along, light's yellow. They make it through the yellow light, first yellow light again. The next light is 3 seconds away. By the time that 3 seconds goes, that light's red, they just keep going. And I walk along there, so I see it all the time. I mean, and most of the time, fortunately, it doesn't result in accidents, but there have been a couple of fatalities there because of that. And so I suggested, well, for less than $500,000, you could reconfigure the traffic lights and just change the signals so they change sequentially instead of simultaneously. And, you know, Chuck could attest to that their signal engineer looked at it and didn't understand my timing chart. It was basically just a timing chart, but I offered to explain it to them, but they weren't interested. So, well, then the other alternative is to just close off Old Brook Road. I mean, I guess there, it's really the west, the east side of Old Brook Road is an entrance to the, what now is Granite Ridge apartment complex, and there's other entrances, and that one could easily be rerouted and just cul-de-saced out at that point. And Old Brook Road from the other direction, could be connected over to Northfield, which then you only have one intersection instead of two intersections in succession, which would still cost much less than Roundabout. But interestingly, the county's position on it was that they expected VDOT to offer alternatives. And VDOT was, well, we don't do that. They have to suggest the alternatives. And so there was kind of a stalemate there. And I talked to Kevin McDermott about it, and he was favorable to it, but it wasn't his decision. It was Jessica Hirsch-Ballering, and she didn't choose to offer any of the alternatives that I suggested. So nothing happened, and that's fine. I just at the end of the day, I just wonder is what is our point in existence? What do we really accomplish, or what can we accomplish as our committee here? It's just sort of a question. I'm still trying to figure it out, and if any of you have any suggestions, by all means, chime in.
I'm one of the new ones you mentioned. I just joined this committee in January as a rep from the planning commission. As far as boards and committees I've served on, and this is no aspersion to anybody here, but it does feel like we basically just get staff reports and then ask questions. And I don't know if that's normal. I don't know if that's just because this is the phase of the smart scale cycle that we're in, or if there's more substantive feedback and advising at other cycles of that other parts of that cycle, right? So I don't have a conclusion on that because I haven't been through multiple cycles of smart scale yet. And I know of some of the projects. I didn't know the details of suggestions you made, but I know about those projects, obviously. I think it is interesting. There was a couple of meetings ago, there was a whole thing of using data and looking at crash data and speed data and stuff that kind of pops up all hotspots where there needs to be attention, where there needs to be studies, and so, well, that's great. And it does sort of beg a little bit of a question. It's like, what are we doing? We've got computers to tell us where to do it. Staff to do the studies of where to do it. Staff to submit the stuff to smart scale, and then workers to put the stuff in. It's like, I mean, we can come here and ask questions, and it's great to know what's going on. And I can tell my friends, oh, hey, is you made the Virgin Diamond, maybe if money comes through. But that's
an assessment of the situation, and yeah, I assure you that this is really no exception. I mean, we had the long-range transportation plan, and we, as individuals, could submit suggestions to that, which were just went in with any other person from the public that made suggestions. And that there was a great effort on that plan to engage the public as much as possible and so forth. But at the end of the day, I think the data won out, and I think that it probably didn't really change anything. I've noticed that, now for several years, I've been on this committee, and even before I was on this committee, in trying to offer alternatives to some of the VDOT plans, is that, VDOT has a stable of consulting engineering firms that they deal with, and they're mostly from the Newport News area or Northern Virginia or Richmond, generally not from around here. And those consultants come and they, for $50,000 or $100,000, they draw up a plan, and that's the plan. They don't draw up 10 plans, they draw up one. And, there's probably some back and forth with VDOT during that phase, but we don't get involved at that point. We get involved after they've finalized their plan with VDOT, and here it is, it's a fait accompli. And I like District Avenue, there was actually a choice. I went to the public hearing on that, and whether or not to cut off the road to the south, so the roundabout services 4 points instead of 3. So that the consultants actually left as an open question, what people prefer. But for the most part, you don't get much choice. And so I just, food for thought. I don't know that anything's gonna change, but I just wonder at times how much advising we actually get to do.
So one thing you might think about is go back and let's look at the chart at the committee. At the next meeting, and review it and then see what should be, what isn't, what is identified as advisory, what isn't. And look at the role of what's done. I haven't looked at it on block pocket. That might be with more people there.
I think we have had some healthy debates here as recently as the smart scale, a lot of us were a little bit surprised and shocked at the proposed changes to smart scale, and some of us presented at the policy board, and, they thank you, but no, and that's fine. Advice is advice. You don't have to take my advice.
Right.
And I think, we're here as citizens, not as transportation experts, even though many of us maybe are transportation experts. And I think it's kind of, what was presented tonight, it all, to me, seemed like, okay, if there was something in there that seemed offensive, transportation-wise, I would have spoken up about it. Is there something that could happen? Probably not, but at least I could give my opinion and advice and say, all right, we're taking this to the next policy board, as an organization. I just, it's kind of, I feel like it's on us. If we're worked up about something, then we have to escalate it. But I don't see us escalating.
Well, those are excellent points, and with regard to the Ivy Road study, I mean, there was a presentation on that, and there was opportunities to submit public comments, and I did, and I looked over it, and actually, I didn't really have anything to disagree with about that. I mean, it was actually decent plan. I mean, I couldn't improve on it. My only suggestion was, if you get to the point where you're starting to talk 6 lanes on the bypass, are you now at the point where maybe you ought to just bypass the whole shebang, like they did in Lynchburg? I mean, Lynchburg used to be like Charlottesville on 20. You had to go through the little town to the north and then the whole way through Lynchburg, 20 million traffic lights. And then at some point they built this fantastic bypass and went around the whole town. Didn't quite finish it. I mean, it could go farther south, but that's been proposed for Charlottesville a couple of different times. That never gets anywhere, but when you're starting to talk about spending maybe hundreds of millions of dollars on trying to, I mean, can you imagine what that would cost to tear that bridge out, the Ivy Road Bridge, and incorporate the railroad tracks into it? I mean, that's $100 million before you even think about it. You get into that kind of money now, or well, suppose you went around the whole shebang farther to the west, or all the way on the east side. I throw those things out there, but it's
You know, I think one thing that is interesting to note is by federal code, you're not required to have a citizens advisory. You're required to have a technical advisory committee.
Right.
This region said it was important to get that citizen engagement, and so they decided they wanted to have this recurring citizen committee in order to make sure that we are information sharing, that we are getting feedback in a sustained way. We have had as staff in the last 10 years, many conversations about outside of the long-range transportation plan, how do we continue to engage that committee? Because that is really where the majority of that advice comes in, is what metrics are we using at what percentage threshold? Like that's where you guys were able to do a lot of that debate that you were talking about. It's then in those off cycles where we are not right up against a smart scale application or right up against a long range transportation plan, where it's then we're going to be sharing the types of information that we're sharing with the policy board and the MPO tech committee in order to continue to do the work plan. And so it is, I mean, I appreciate the comments that you're making and I appreciate the comments that you've said because it's not always clear because there is no code dictating this is what you're supposed to be doing with your citizen advisory board the way it does for MPO tech. So I appreciate this conversation because we certainly, especially when you have staff transitions, then articulating the purpose of that body and what it is that where's the value add, both for the MPO policy board, but also for the citizens that are giving up their time to come to these meetings. I think what's also unique about CTAC in our region, which is not the same as CTAC in many other places, because we happen to have a lot of people that have expertise. Normally, it is a group of citizens that just have some interest in transportation. It's not engineers and professors of transportation and, you know, folks that work for the Research Council and planning commissioners. And so we do have a level of expertise that wants to engage in a little bit different of a way than the average citizen would want to engage in the projects. So that's just something to note that we're very fortunate that our citizen advisory committee has so much technical expertise. But most CTACs, when they say, well, we've had, you know, designed drawings presented by our citizen committee, they're like, what do you mean you've had drawings submitted by your citizens? You know, like, do you guys even look at those? You have to have engineers, you know, so it's a little bit of a balance that we try to strike.
But I'll say I do appreciate being able to be a bridge, so to speak, to the planning commission. And to, here for it. Stick around and but no, I mean, to have the clearly laid out and have the opportunity to ask some questions about this part of the project. We'll be able to go back, next Tuesday and tell the planning folks what's up. I mean, I think, kind of similar, I've been a part of like strategic planning or advisory groups on a number of boards over the years, different nonprofit organizations and stuff. And when there's like that sort of messy middle of strategic planning, there's a lot of engagement, a lot of like feedback and input. And then when it's sort of set, it's just sort of like, here's what we're up to. Does that sound okay? You know, I get it. It's like,
Yeah. All right. Well, that's fine. I just wanted to vent a little bit, I guess it is, but yeah, it's something to keep in mind. As one time, it must have been several years ago, she's now a supervisor, but Ann Malik, I think, was on the CTAC, and she was made a comment at one of the policy board meetings that, you know, they were perhaps a little more engaged than then and now, or something that she felt that CTAC was perhaps had been more effective in her day than it has become. But I wasn't there then, so I can't say.
Well, I can also say that Virginia, compared to a lot of other states, is a little bit unique in terms of how they do their processes. So the competitive process to apply for funding through Smart Scale removes a lot of the like decision making that happens where MPOs in other states might have real like on the ground decisions about how funding is spent within their area. So I think that creates another challenge in terms of how much autonomy and decision making an MPO has, which also trickles down to, you know, impact how much influence a citizen advisory group is able to have on transportation planning and project selection and things like that.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, you know, even the policy board who actually has the power to make decisions. At the end of the day, how much power do they really have? You know, you got the Commonwealth Transportation Board, that at the end of the day is ultimately calling the shots of where the money goes. And they make the rules and they, you know, do a lot of that. So, yeah, there's only so much anybody can do, but, that's interesting.
It's also a challenge that there seems, and it's a good thing, that there are so many outreach groups and versions of this group for everything you can imagine. So, I mean, I can't remember the last time we had a citizen come and bring a topic, because there's so many places that you can raise an issue. But like, I don't know if anyone's ever come in to talk about bicycles or sidewalks or shared use, or, you know, just a citizen outside of this group. And that may be because there are so many places now online you can do it. So like, yeah, how do you make sure to stay relevant, to your point, Lee, and not just be a rubber stamp, and make sure that we're doing the job that you guys want us to do?
Yeah, well, Peter Krebs frequently shows up at policy board meetings to make comments, but, yeah, he doesn't bother to come here. That's what.
But I would think that citizens wouldn't come here, they would go
Yeah.
to the policy board.
We just need to be more disruptive, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
We need to give this group a harder time.
Send us with your messages, we'll put it in a memo and say this is from, and as the liaison, sitting in the policy board meetings, you know, when they say, do you have any updates from CTAC, that's an opportunity to have the floor to say, these are the discussions we're having, and
Yeah,
here's the
yeah.
feedback that we have.
Well, I know and as you recall, we did as a board actually vote on that, Louisa Road, 250 thing, and, but they just killed that project, so we really didn't get to go anywhere with it anyway. But I did bring it up at the policy board. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that was the case where, you know, if VDOT comes up with what I think is a bad design, I will jump up and down and say, no, there's a better way to do this. The time, though, they do pretty good. I gotta hand it to them for that, but,
Lee, with all due respect, I was wondering if we could wrap her up.
yeah. Yep, the limit, so no other comments or questions, we are adjourned. Thank you for that.
Oh, yes, the next meeting is September 8th.
All right, is it when?
That's the one last time.
September
18th.
18, okay.
Thank you, Chuck.
I have one day.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's.
No,
The-
no. We have something online. Bio comments.
Yeah, so,
Um,
That's next to bio.
usually like before every point.
The one that's.
So.
Right. Yeah.
And then find the date.
Yeah.
That's just come back on the wall.
I think for-
It's a by right.
Okay.
Signed with you.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm sort of concerned.
And
Okay.
the email through to send it to CTAC invitation. So you have membership here, but this is like the email list to send to, which has like Chuck and
Right.
and extra people on it.
But it's supposed to be.
It's supposed to make it better.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get one the roundabout, and see if it's gonna be as possible.
We're trying to make time.
The Sean Warren.
Oh.
I think I'll add myself here, because I don't.
So if I want to take a right turn.
Continually, but you can add me and then you're.
Right.
And I will totally look at it. But I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
But I don't want myself here unless it comes to delete me. Like, I'll put it here just like a little,
okay.
I won't even put anything else, so you'll know it's to delete it.
Oh, you know, so,
Well, the reason I'm like, I can't give more.
I would start with somebody. Nothing else to work. Yeah, so just there was some guys complaining. Michael. And then just see if you can do
Yeah.
sit down.
Okay. Yeah, and then we can kind of sit down together.
More like just compare.
Oh, yeah.
Is running.
Well, yeah, so when you say Rio Commons and Rio Point, it's like some of they all start to sound the same.
Right.
Yeah, the one on the other part. Oh, okay, I know exactly where.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What do you think I should start? Captain?
I would start with the county, and then if they say that's all we know, we gotta have to find out. And the county is probably. Yeah, and from a planning commission point of view, people is by right, we don't have any say at all.
You can.
Thanks.
Okay.
It just bypasses us, is what I'm saying.
You don't have anything, even after 6,000 feet. They have.
Unless they require, if it's by right, we don't have anything.